There are times of the year when it seems almost impossible to get a bite, and this summer to fall transition is one of those times. There are all kinds of really great finesse presentations that we can use when the bite gets tough, but one thing that we can and should do as anglers that even myself don't do often enough, and that is to use very, very light line. Here on this spinning rod today, what I've done, I've got my braid backing on here, but I've gone to 6-pound fluorocarbon, and I normally will use a lot of times like a 12-pound fluoro or even a 12-pound monofilament, and I usually do just fine with that. But when that bite is tough, when all we're doing is catching little 6-inch bass and we know the fish are there but we just can't get bit, that is the time to downsize. There's a lot of professional anglers that have made excellent careers by fishing as light as line as they possibly can when the water conditions call for it. Obviously here we're talking ultra clear water or water with a very, very light stain to it. When you take a look at the underwater footage between the 12-pound mono and the 6-pound fluorocarbon, there's a noticeable difference. And you have to remember in this late summer going into early fall, especially in a lot of lakes, these bass have been hammered. One of my favorite cartoons when I was a kid had two bass talking to each other, and one of them said, well, it must be Saturday because all the cartoons are out, and there's just crankbaits all over the place. And it just makes me laugh to think about it, because these bass in smaller bodies of water, in heavily pressured bodies of water, by this time of the year have seen everything, and going with really light line can separate you from other anglers, and you can even go right behind other boats and pick up fish that they were not able to catch. But there's a few things that we need to do with light line to be successful. It's not like just putting out a big old flipping jig and 50-pound braid and then just hammering it home. We can't do that. So one of the first things that you want to do when you're fishing with very, very light line is use a light wire hook. And with a light wire hook, it takes less energy to go ahead and get it to penetrate the lip of the fish. With that light wire, there's not very much resistance to it. So when I put a lure out here, and this one's a Ned rig with this really light wire hook and this light line, when I feel a bite or when I notice that the fish has picked it up, I'm not gonna just rear back and set the hook. I'm gonna reel down to it and apply pressure. That's all it takes to have that hook penetrate. So the number one tip when you're fishing with really, really light line is put a light wire hook on there. The second thing that you want to do, and you could arguably say this is the first tip, is you need to set that drag properly. This is a situation where you really want that bass to be able to peel some line. Now remember, with this lighter wire hook, it will penetrate easily, so having that drag a little bit looser than you normally would set it is definitely okay. It's not a big deal. The other thing you want to consider when you're fishing really, really light line on your leader is make sure that leader is very long. My leader here, this fluoro leader, is actually longer than the length of the rod, and when I go ahead and I reel it up to get ready to cast, the knot either stops right in here or sometimes actually goes a little bit onto the spool. But with thin braid and light line and using the red Phillips knot, it's such a small knot, it casts absolutely fine, but you want to have a good length of leader. And the reason being, if the fishing is so tough that you've got to use line that is this light, you don't want your braid to only be 18 inches away from the lure that you are fishing. You really, really want to present this bait without that bass seeing that braid at all. So make sure you got a lot longer leader than maybe you normally would. What are some tactics that I would use with a light line like this? Well, obviously a Ned rig is a good one. You go ahead and redo your drop shots with 6-pound line. That is a great presentation. You can use light wire shaky heads is another excellent place to use a lot lighter line. And of course, going with something like a weightless wacky rig, that's a good place to be able to use this as well. Now, if you're a typical power angler where you really just like to go to town with power tactics, this can take some getting used to. I mean, expect that there's going to be times when you break some fish off because you revert back to that hook set or that style of hook set that you have been doing. But just constantly think to yourself, okay, if I get that bite, if I feel something spongy, if I feel a little weight, I'm just going to go ahead and reel down to it. And using this really light line, I mean, I've got friends that go down to 4-pound test. I don't go that far. 6 is about as low that I go, especially in the waters that I fish. But if you keep telling yourself, just reel down, reel down, reel down, you're gonna land fish. There's no need to run all over the deck of the boat. Let that drag do the work, especially when you've got a good one. And I promise you, on these days where the bite is so difficult, when it just seems like you just want to pack up and go home, this can be that one thing that makes a huge difference. So go ahead and get yourself a spool of really good fluoro, 6-pound, 8-pound, and give it a shot. I think you're going to be pleased with the results that you get. And hey, if you'd like to watch a video on how to become a better bass angler, I got 2 strategies in this video right here I think that you'll find interesting, so check that out. And make sure you go out and encourage someone today. You never know how you might just change their life. For the Bass Fishing Life, I'm your host, Steve Rogers.